Talrus had spent 40 cycles studying warfare across 17 species, but nothing prepared him for this. The observation deck of the Harmony's Edge provided a perfect view of the human fleet assembling near the Redstone colony, and every instinct he possessed screamed that something was wrong with what he witnessed. Human ships moved with a precision that shouldn't exist in newly recruited coalition members, their formations shifting like schools of fish responding to invisible currents. He'd expected chaos, perhaps some bravado, certainly the kind of disorganized aggression that marked most species' first major conflict. Instead, he watched mathematics made manifest in metal and energy. The Kreth Dominion had attacked Redstone 6 hours ago. 40,000 civilians now sat in captured orbital stations, while Kreth commanders issued demands for territorial concessions. Standard galactic protocol dictated weeks of negotiation, careful positioning, limited strikes designed more for political theater than tactical advantage. Talrus had documented this pattern across dozens of conflicts, had written extensively on the predictable rhythms of civilized warfare. He expected humans to follow the same path, perhaps with some Earth-born variation on traditional tactics. Admiral Hensley commanded the human response fleet from a ship called Determined Mercy, a name Talrus found paradoxical until he met the woman herself. She stood barely 1.6 meters tall, her hair gray at the temples, her eyes holding something Talrus couldn't quite identify. Not rage, not fear, not even determination in the way other species demonstrated it. When she spoke, her voice carried the same quality as her ship's movements, absolute certainty wrapped in apparent calm. "Observer Talrus," she said when he introduced himself aboard her flagship, "I understand you're here to document our military procedures for the Coalition archives." Her statement held no inflection, no question, simply acknowledgement of fact. "Yes, Admiral," Talrus replied, his translator rendering his chittering into standard galactic. "I've studied 17 species combat doctrines. I'm fascinated to observe humanity's approach to conflict resolution." Something flickered across Hensley's face, an expression Talrus later learned to recognize as dark amusement. "Conflict resolution," she repeated. "Yes, I suppose that's one way to describe it. Tell me, observer. What do your studies say about hostage situations in civilized warfare?" Talrus consulted his data files mentally. Standard protocol requires immediate de-escalation, third-party mediation, and proportional response to any hostage casualties. The aggressor typically receives territorial or political concessions in exchange for peaceful resolution. "Typically," Hensley agreed. "And how often does this prevent the next incident?" The question caught Talrus off guard. In 40 cycles of study, he'd never considered warfare as anything but discrete events, each conflict its own contained phenomenon. "I don't understand the question, Admiral." "You will." Hensley turned to her tactical display where human ships continued their incomprehensible dance. "The Kreth killed 10 of our civilians 3 hours ago. They broadcast the executions as a demonstration of resolve." Her voice didn't change, didn't harden or crack, simply stated fact. "They expect us to negotiate now. They expect us to follow galactic norms and trade territory for lives." "Will you?" Talrus asked. "No." Hensley's finger traced patterns on the display that meant nothing to Talrus's academic understanding of naval tactics. "We gave them 6 hours to release the hostages and withdraw. They chose to execute our people instead. They chose this." "Chose what, Admiral?" "You're about to find out." She turned to her communications officer. "Signal the fleet. Protocol Ragnarok is active. God have mercy on them because we won't." Talrus's translator struggled with the word Ragnarok, offering only fragments. End times, final battle, twilight of gods. He started to ask for clarification when the human fleet moved. Later, he would spend weeks analyzing the recordings, trying to understand how 47 ships could transition from holding pattern to attack formation in 4.3 seconds. In the moment, he could only watch as human vessels accelerated beyond safety margins, their formations spreading like fingers of a closing fist. "Admiral," he managed, "your ships are exceeding recommended thrust ratios by 30%. 40% actually, a human officer named Rodriguez corrected. We built our ships to survive forces that would kill most species. We use every bit of that capability when necessary. But the crew, Talris protested, will endure. Rodriguez's expression held no doubt. We're persistence hunters observer. We evolved to chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. A little discomfort from high-G maneuvers is nothing compared to what our ancestors survived. Talris watched the tactical display transform. Human ships weren't approaching the Kreth positions directly. Instead, they scattered across multiple vectors, appearing to fragment their formation into chaos. Then he noticed the pattern, each ship positioned precisely to cover three-dimensional angles that shouldn't matter in void combat. "What are they doing?" he asked. "Preparation," Hensley replied. "The Kreth think in terms of naval engagement, ships facing ships, guns firing guns. They're preparing to defend against a frontal assault. And you're not providing one. We're providing something they can't prepare for." Hensley's fingers danced across her console. 43 of those ships aren't attack vessels observer. They're carrying something the Kreth haven't accounted for. Before Talris could ask what, space itself seemed to ripple. Human ships that had appeared to be maintaining distance suddenly occupied positions they couldn't have reached in available time. His sensors recalibrated frantically, trying to reconcile impossible data. "What just happened?" he demanded. "Stealth deployment," Rodriguez explained. "We've had assets in position for 3 days, hidden in sensor shadows using passive systems only. What you're seeing now is them going active." "That's impossible." Talris checked his own instruments. "Coalition sensor technology would have detected any approach." "Coalition sensor technology," Rodriguez agreed. "We don't use coalition sensors observer. We use human ones, and we've been hiding from each other's military hardware for thousands of years." The Kreth fleet finally seemed to recognize their predicament. Talris watched their formations shift, trying to respond to threats from impossible angles. But human ships moved faster, thought faster, coordinated in ways his academic understanding couldn't process. Within minutes, the entire tactical situation had transformed from siege to encirclement, and the Kreth hadn't fired a single shot. "Last chance," Hensley broadcast to the Kreth commander. "Release the hostages, withdraw your forces. We promise safe passage and no pursuit." The Kreth response came in the form of another execution, this time 12 civilians. Talris felt his spiracles constrict in horror. Surely this would trigger human rage, the kind of emotional response that led to mistakes and casualties. Instead, Hensley simply nodded. "Very well, they made their choice." She turned to Rodriguez. "Execute rescue operations, authorization code Valkyrie 7. "Valkyrie 7 confirmed." Rodriguez's hands moved across his console. 40 teams deploying. Talris's sensors detected nothing. No launches, no assault craft, no indication of any rescue attempt. "I don't see any deployment." "You wouldn't," Rodriguez replied. "They've been aboard that station for 2 days. We sent them in with the civilian supply shipments. They've been mapping, planning, waiting for authorization." Understanding crashed over Talris like a wave. Humans hadn't been preparing to fight a battle. They'd already positioned to win it. Every move, every formation, every apparent hesitation had been careful positioning for this exact moment. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked. "Since the moment Kreth forces entered our space," Hensley replied. "We hoped for peaceful resolution. We prepared for the alternative, hoped for the best, planned for the worst. It served humanity well for millennia." On the displays, Kreth forces finally realized the humans weren't attacking their ships. Internal security feeds from the captured station showed chaos as humans materialized from shadows and service corridors, moving with coordinated precision that turned defense into panic. Talris watched team after team extract civilians while systematically dismantling Kreth resistance. They didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like surgical instruments, each move calculated for maximum efficiency and minimum casualties. 32 minutes to full evacuation, Rodriguez reported. Hensley nodded. "And then," she said softly. "And then," Rodriguez confirmed. Talris didn't ask what came next. He was beginning to understand that humans played a longer game than any species he'd studied. They weren't fighting a battle. They were making a statement that would echo across the galaxy for generations. He'd come to document human warfare. He was about to witness something far more terrifying, human purpose unleashed without restraint or mercy. And somewhere deep in his academic mind, a question formed that would haunt his research for years to come. What kind of species masters warfare so completely that even their mercy seems calculated for maximum impact? The answer, he suspected, was the kind that survives 10,000 years of fighting itself. The extraction took 31 minutes. Talris watched through human tactical feeds as 40 teams moved through the captured station like water finding cracks in stone, flowing around resistance rather than confronting it directly. Kreth soldiers fired at empty corridors, while humans flanked through ventilation systems and maintenance shafts. They didn't announce their presence until civilians were already moving toward designated safe zones. A young human soldier named Patterson carried a Kreth child who'd been separated from her parents. The girl screamed and fought until Patterson started singing, some Earth melody that Talris's translator couldn't parse but needed no translation, the universal language of comfort. By the time they reached the evacuation point, the child clung to Patterson like family. Talris recorded the interaction, noting the ease with which humans shifted from combat to compassion. No other species in his research demonstrated such fluid transition. "All civilians secure," Rodriguez reported. "0 friendly casualties, 18 Kreth soldiers incapacitated, none killed." "Confirmed," Hensley acknowledged. "Now they see what we can do when we're being gentle." Her emphasis on the final word sent chills through Talris's exoskeleton. The Kreth commander broadcast immediately. "You have your civilians human. Withdraw and this ends peacefully." Hensley's laugh held no humor. "You murdered 22 of our people, executed them while broadcasting their deaths, and now you want peaceful resolution." She leaned forward in her command chair. "Let me explain something about humans, Commander. We don't forget. We don't forgive without accountability, and we certainly don't reward murder with concessions." "Then you choose war," the Kreth commander replied. "No," Hensley corrected. "You chose war when you killed our civilians. We're simply accepting your choice and responding accordingly." She cut the transmission and turned to her tactical officer. "Phase 2. Show them what human warfare actually means." Talris watched the human fleet shift again. This time he recognized the formation, a classic envelopment maneuver documented in 17 different species' tactical databases. Except humans executed it in 3 dimensions simultaneously, their ships moving in concert like a single organism. The Kreth fleet found itself surrounded by vessels that appeared from sensor shadows and impossible angles. "They're going to fight," Rodriguez observed, reading weapons charging across their line. "Good," Hensley replied. "Let them fire first. I want this documented properly." She glanced at Talris. "For the archives." Understanding dawned. Humans weren't just fighting a battle. They were creating a legal record, every action carefully calibrated to maintain defensive posture while demonstrating overwhelming capability. When Kreth ships opened fire, human vessels simply weren't where the weapons expected them to be. Point defense systems caught what few shots found targets, detonating them harmlessly against shields. "Return fire," Hensley ordered. "Disable only. I want prisoners for trial." What followed defied Talris's understanding of naval combat. Human ships didn't aim for Kreth vessels' centers of mass or weapon systems. Instead, they targeted propulsion, communications, and life support, systems that wouldn't kill crews but would render ships helpless. Precision that should be impossible at combat ranges with moving targets. Yet human weapons found their marks with disturbing accuracy. "How are they doing this?" Talris demanded. "Your targeting solutions are compensating for 3-dimensional movement, relativistic effects, and point defense countermeasures simultaneously." "Practice," Patterson answered. He'd returned from the evacuation and now monitored tactical displays. We've been shooting at each other since we invented projectile weapons. First arrows, then bullets, then missiles. We got good at hitting things that don't want to be hit. A Kreth destroyer attempted to ram a human frigate in desperation. The human ship accelerated perpendicular to the attack vector while simultaneously firing a spread of kinetic penetrators. The Kreth vessel's engines died mid-charge, momentum carrying it harmlessly past while its crew sat in darkness. Life support functioning, but nothing else. Surgical, Talrus muttered. Necessary, Rodriguez corrected. Every Kreth ship we disable is one that won't threaten colonies, won't kill civilians, won't force us to come back here in 5 years. We're not fighting a battle, observer. We're removing a threat permanently. The engagement lasted 17 minutes. By its end, 43 Kreth vessels drifted in space, intact but helpless, their crews alive but thoroughly defeated. Talrus reviewed the casualty reports in disbelief. 78 Kreth wounded, 3 dead from accidents during evacuation, 0 human losses. He looked at Hensley. This isn't possible. No species achieves this kind of precision in real combat. Most species don't need to, Hensley replied. Most species fight for territory, resources, political advantage. They accept casualties as inevitable cost of war. She gestured at the tactical display. Humans learn the hard way that casualties aren't inevitable. They're failures of planning, failures of training, failures of will to do the hard work of precision. But the cost, Talrus protested. The time spent training, the resources invested in precision weapons and targeting systems. Surely it would be more efficient to simply overwhelm the enemy. Patterson turned to face him directly. My great-grandfather fought in Earth's last major war. 85 million people died, most of them civilians, cities burned, populations starved, entire generations traumatized. His voice stayed level, but something hard entered his eyes. After that, humanity decided efficiency wasn't measured in how fast you won. It's measured in how few people die and how long peace lasts afterward. The Kreth fleet's surrender came in stages. First the damaged vessels, then those that watched helplessly as human precision dismantled their companions. Finally, the flagship when its commander realized no help was coming. Kreth High Command had abandoned them, recalled reinforcements to defend more valuable territories. The soldiers who'd been told to hold at all costs learned they weren't worth the cost of rescue. Broadcast this to every Kreth frequency, Hensley ordered. Your government abandoned you. They ordered you to die for territory they won't defend, but humans don't leave enemies to die in space. We're sending rescue vessels. Surrender peacefully and you'll be treated according to coalition law. Resist and you'll drift here until your life support fails. Choose wisely. Talrus watched his instruments detect human ships approaching the disabled Kreth vessels, not warships but medical frigates and rescue craft. You're actually going to save them, he said. Of course, Hensley replied. We're not monsters, observer, we're just very good at war. There's a difference. Over the next hours, Talrus documented something unprecedented in his research. Humans methodically rescued every Kreth crew member from their disabled ships, provided medical care for the wounded, processed prisoners according to strict legal protocols. They treated defeated enemies with the same precision they'd applied to defeating them. No casual cruelty, no revenge for the murdered civilians, just cold efficiency and perfect adherence to rules of war. Why, Talrus finally asked Rodriguez. Your people were murdered. You have every right to vengeance by galactic custom. Why show mercy to those who showed you none? Rodriguez considered the question carefully. Because vengeance feels good for maybe an hour. Then you're left with guilt, trauma, and enemies who will seek their own revenge. Mercy, on the other hand, he gestured at the Kreth prisoners being processed, creates cognitive dissonance. They expected death or torture. Instead, they get medical care and fair trials. Their entire worldview has to adjust. Some will resist, but many will question why they fought us, and their children definitely will. You're fighting for their children, Talrus realized. We're fighting for everyone's children, Patterson interjected. Ours, theirs, yours. Every war humanity fights now, we fight to prevent the next one. It's more expensive, more complicated, requires more discipline. But it works. Earth hasn't seen major war in 300 years, not because we forgot how to fight, but because we remembered why we shouldn't. The last Kreth prisoner came aboard, wounded but alive, terrified but unharmed. Human medics treated his injuries while explaining his rights under coalition law. Talris recorded the scene, knowing his academic colleagues would struggle to accept what he documented. Warfare without unnecessary death, victory without cruelty, strength tempered by wisdom. Admiral Hensley addressed the assembled prisoners through translators. You attacked our colony, murdered our civilians, threatened our people. Under galactic law, we could execute every one of you and be justified. She paused, letting that sink in. But humans learned something your leaders apparently haven't. That justice and revenge aren't the same thing. You'll face trial for your crimes. Those responsible for civilian deaths will be punished. The rest will be repatriated when this conflict ends. And when you return home, remember this. Humans showed you mercy when you showed us none. Think carefully before you. Let your government order you to attack us again. Later, alone in his quarters, Talris reviewed the day's recordings. 40,000 civilians rescued without casualties. An entire fleet defeated with minimal deaths. Prisoners treated according to law despite legitimate grievances. He documented human warfare and found something more disturbing than savagery. He'd found species that had mastered violence so completely they could choose restraint. And that choice, that discipline, made them more dangerous than any rage-driven warrior could ever be. Because rage burns out, discipline endures. 3 weeks into the siege, and Talris still couldn't comprehend human patience. The remaining Kreth forces held a fortified position in the Hadron Belt, surrounded by human ships that could have destroyed them in hours. Instead, humans waited. They'd cut off supply lines, blocked reinforcements, established a perimeter that nothing crossed without their permission. And they waited. This is inefficient, Talris observed to Patterson during a routine meal. Human food still puzzled him, but he'd learned to appreciate what they called coffee. You have overwhelming force. Why not press the advantage? Patterson chewed his ration bar thoughtfully. Tell me, observer, how long did the Krethvathian War last? 47 years, Talris replied immediately. He'd studied that conflict extensively. And how did it end? Mutual exhaustion. Both sides depleted resources until neither could continue fighting. An armistice was signed, but tensions remained. Exactly, Patterson pointed his ration bar for emphasis. 47 years of killing because neither side was willing to wait for a better solution. They just kept throwing soldiers at each other until they ran out. We could do that, storm their position, take it in 3 days, lose maybe 10,000 people on both sides. He paused. Or we wait 3 weeks, maybe a month, and they surrender with less than 100 casualties total, which is more efficient. But your people aren't suffering those casualties, Talris argued. Why not press while you have advantage? Because advantage isn't measured in a single battle. Rodriguez joined the conversation. It's measured in what comes after. If we slaughter them here, their families remember. Their children grow up hating us. In 30 years, we fight this war again. If we wait them out, show restraint, demonstrate. That surrender means survival. We break the cycle. Talris sipped his coffee, considering. Human logic seemed backward until examined from generational timescales. Your species thinks very long-term. We have to, Patterson replied. Humans live maybe 100 years if we're lucky, but our nations, our civilizations last thousands. You know how many empires rose and fell on Earth? How many times we nearly destroyed ourselves? He didn't wait for an answer. We learned the hard way that decisions made today echo for centuries, so now we make different decisions. The Kreth commander understood human strategy by week 4. Talris monitored the communications between besieged forces and their rapidly deteriorating morale. Supplies dwindling, reinforcements never arriving, rescue attempts intercepted before they reached effective range. And through it all, humans broadcast footage of captured Kreth soldiers, clean, fed, receiving medical care, awaiting fair trials. The contrast between government promises and enemy reality proved devastating to Kreth resolve. This is psychological warfare, Talris observed. This is honesty, Hensley corrected. We're not broadcasting propaganda. Those prisoners are actually being treated well. We're simply making sure their comrades know it. The Kreth government told them we'd torture prisoners, execute survivors, commit atrocities. We're proving them wrong with documentation. 2 Kreth destroyers defected on day 29. Their crews surrendered peacefully, citing the treatment of previous prisoners. Humans processed them efficiently, documenting every step. When Kreth officers tried to frame human actions as weakness, their own soldiers could point to living comrades who'd chosen surrender and survived. Talrus interviewed one defector through translators, a junior officer named Keyleth who'd commanded a weapons battery. "Why did you surrender?" Talrus asked. "Because my government lied," Keyleth replied simply. "They said humans were savages who'd kill us all, but I watched the broadcasts, saw prisoners alive, healthy, treated with dignity. My own commanders executed crew members for suggesting retreat. Humans treated their prisoners better than our leaders treated us. You don't fear revenge for the civilians your forces killed." Keyleth's expression, translated through his species' equivalent of shame, spoke volumes. "I fear justice, but I understand it." "What?" "I don't understand is why humans showed mercy when they could have shown vengeance. We murdered their people. They rescued ours. That's not warfare as I was taught it." "What were you taught?" "That war is about dominance, crushing enemies, taking what you want by force. That mercy is weakness." Keyleth looked at the human guard standing nearby, armed but relaxed. "But humans demonstrated overwhelming force, then chose restraint. That's not weakness. That's something else entirely." Talrus published his observations in daily reports to the coalition. Reactions varied from fascination to concern. Several species suggested restricting human military operations, arguing that such precision in violence represented greater threat than traditional warfare. Hensley laughed when he shared this. "They're afraid we're too good at not killing them," she said. "Let that irony sink in, observer." "They fear what you represent," Talrus explained. "Most species view war as destructive force impossible to fully control. You've proven it can be precise, measured, directed. That's more frightening than chaos because it suggests intention rather than passion." "Good," Hensley replied. "Fear of human precision might prevent conflicts better than fear of human violence ever could. We don't want to be seen as pushover pacifists. We want to be seen as restrained predators. Mess with us and we'll remove you from the battlefield with surgical efficiency. But leave us alone and we're perfectly pleasant neighbors." The siege broke on day 38. The Kreth commander contacted human forces with unconditional surrender. His remaining ships numbered 43, crews depleted by desertion and defection. They emerged from the asteroid field with weapons cold and shields down, trusting human promises of fair treatment. Talrus documented the surrender processing. Humans methodical, following protocols with same precision they applied to combat. Every prisoner logged, medical condition assessed, legal rights explained. No triumphalism, no celebration, just professional execution of necessary tasks. A young Kreth soldier asked his human guard why they hadn't simply destroyed the fleet. The guard, barely older than the prisoner, replied, "Because our job isn't killing people, it's ending threats. You're not a threat anymore, you're just a kid who got bad orders from worse leaders. Killing you accomplishes nothing except making." Someone else want revenge. Patterson found Talrus reviewing footage that evening. "What are you thinking, observer?" "That human warfare is more terrifying than any violence I've documented," Talrus admitted. "Because you've made it rational. Other species fight from passion, instinct, cultural imperative. You fight from calculation. Every death weighed against strategic value, every casualty measured against long-term goals." "Is that wrong?" Patterson asked. "No," Talrus replied slowly. "But it means humans can wage war without losing themselves to it. Most species become monsters in combat. Abandon reason for rage. Humans remain perfectly rational while inflicting violence. That's profoundly disturbing to species who see war as descent into chaos." "We tried the chaos approach," Patterson said quietly. For about 10,000 years, burned cities, slaughtered populations, committed every atrocity imaginable. You know what we learned? He didn't wait for response. That rage feels righteous in the moment but leaves scars that last generations. Every massacre created new enemies. Every burned city guaranteed future war. So we changed. Not because we became soft, but because we became smart. Talrus gestured at his recordings. The galaxy sees humans as dangerous warriors. We are dangerous, Patterson agreed. But not because we're good at killing, because we're good at not killing. We can surround 43 ships, blockade them for 38 days, watch them slowly collapse. And when they surrender, we process them with same precision we used to trap them. That level of control, that discipline. It means we can apply exactly the force necessary, no more, no less. Precisely calibrated violence is far more dangerous than rage-driven slaughter. Admiral Hensley addressed the Coalition Assembly that night via transmission. Human forces have successfully concluded operations against Kreth military assets. Total casualties: 647 Kreth wounded, 38 dead from medical complications, 0 human losses, 3,200 Kreth prisoners awaiting trial. We achieved strategic objectives while adhering to Coalition rules of engagement and minimizing loss of life. She paused. This is human warfare. Precision over passion, discipline over rage, long-term peace over short-term victory. If the Coalition fears this approach to conflict, I suggest examining why. The alternative, endless cycles of revenge and retribution, seems preferable. The transmission ended. Talrus sat in silence, processing. He'd come to document human savagery and instead witnessed human wisdom. They'd taken everything warfare could be, violence, strategy, psychology, logistics, and refined it to art. Not art of destruction, but art of resolution, ending conflicts with minimal damage while establishing conditions for lasting peace. Rodriguez appeared at his quarters. Admiral wants to know if you need anything for your reports. Understanding, Talrus replied. I need to understand how you do this, how you face enemies who murdered your people and respond with measured force instead of vengeance. Rodriguez considered. Because vengeance feels good for an hour, peace feels good for generations. Humans finally learned to choose the latter. He smiled slightly. Took us long enough. Talrus recorded his final observations on the siege. Humanity has weaponized patience. They can wait, watch, let enemies collapse under weight of their own poor decisions. This requires discipline most species lack, but it achieves victory at minimal cost while establishing moral authority. The galaxy should fear not human violence but human restraint, because species that can choose mercy from position of strength is far more dangerous than one that knows only rage. Outside his viewport, human ships began departing, their work complete, objectives achieved, enemy neutralized, and somewhere among the stars, other species watched and wondered. What kind of warriors win by waiting? What kind of predators spare their prey? What kind of species masters violence so thoroughly they rarely need to use it? The answer would reshape galactic understanding of warfare for centuries to come. 6 months after the surrender, Talrus returned to former Kreth territory expecting occupation forces and resentful populations. Instead, he found human civilian engineers rebuilding infrastructure alongside Kreth workers. The orbital station where 22 humans died now housed a joint medical facility. Kreth doctors trained in human emergency procedures, while human physicians learned Kreth physiology. Transformation that defied everything Talrus understood about post-war dynamics. Patterson met him at the station dock, now wearing civilian contractor identification rather than military insignia. Observer, didn't expect to see you. Back here, I needed to document the occupation, Talrus replied. There is no occupation, Patterson corrected. We're advisors, consultants, temporary administrators until Kreth establish stable self-governance, but we're not occupiers. Occupiers take, we're building. Talrus followed Patterson through the station. Where he expected military checkpoints, he found open corridors. Where he anticipated armed patrols, he saw civilian contractors. Where are your soldiers? He asked. Gone mostly. We kept a small security force, but they're mainly training Kreth police in peacekeeping doctrine, Patterson gestured at the rebuilding efforts. Soldiers break things. We needed people who build things, so we sent soldiers home and brought in engineers. A Kreth supervisor approached. Patterson, we have structural concerns about the Western habitat ring. Human safety standards require reinforcement beyond our original specifications. Then we reinforce, Patterson replied immediately. I'll get a team on it, better safe than sorry. The Kreth supervisor hesitated. This will delay completion by 3 weeks and cost additional resources. Correct, Patterson agreed. But it means the station will be safe for the next century instead of failing in 50 years. We're building for your grandchildren, not just for completion deadlines. Talrus observed this exchange with fascination. You're spending human resources on Kreth infrastructure. Why? Because stable neighbors don't attack each other, Patterson explained. We could have left this station damaged, forced Kreth to repair it themselves. They'd resent us, cut corners, build just enough to function. In 20 years it would fail and they'd blame humans. He pointed at the construction crews. Or we help build it right the first time. They see we kept our word about reconstruction. Their kids grow up in stable stations built to human safety standards. In 20 years, they remember humans helped rather than hurt, which scenario prevents future conflict. Talrus spent weeks documenting human reconstruction efforts. Everywhere he looked, humans worked alongside former enemies, teaching, building, sharing. A human teacher named Foster ran engineering classes for young Kreth. Why learn human methods? A student asked during Talrus's observation. Foster pulled up holographic displays, because human methods kept our stations running through wars, disasters, and accidents for 300 years. We learned the hard way what works and what fails. We're offering that knowledge freely because stations that don't collapse benefit everyone, including us as your neighbors. But our government attacked you, another student protested. Why help us after that? Foster's expression softened. Your government made decisions, your kids studying engineering. Should we punish you for choices you didn't make? Should we let your stations fail because adults started a war? That's not justice. That's just creating the next generation of enemies. She gestured at the class. Or we teach you to build safe stations. You grow up skilled, employed, living well. You remember humans invested in your future, which option prevents your generation from repeating your parents' mistakes. Talrus interviewed the new Kreth Prime Minister, formerly a junior officer who defected during the siege. Why did your people accept human assistance? He asked. Because the alternative was collapse, she replied honestly. Our government bankrupted us fighting a war they couldn't win. Then they fled, leaving us with damaged infrastructure, crashed economy, no plan for recovery. Humans offered help with no strings attached, just requirement that we govern transparently and peacefully. After watching our leaders lie repeatedly, human honesty was refreshing. But surely there's resentment. Humans defeated you militarily. There's resentment toward our former government for starting a war we couldn't win, she corrected. Toward humans, mostly there's gratitude mixed with embarrassment. They defeated us thoroughly, then treated us better than our own leaders did. That's hard to resent. Talrus documented economic data that baffled coalition economists. Human investment in Kreth recovery exceeded the entire cost of military operations. This makes no economic sense, he told Rodriguez during a tour of reconstructed facilities. You're spending more on peace than you spent on war. Short-term, yes, Rodriguez agreed. But calculate long-term costs. If we'd left Kreth to collapse, what happens? Refugee crisis, piracy, probably civil war. Coalition would have to intervene anyway, costing everyone resources. Or we invest now, stabilize the region, create trading partners instead of failed state, which costs less over 50 years. Trading partners, Talrus repeated. You're turning enemies into economic allies. We're turning enemies into neighbors who have better options than attacking us, Rodriguez clarified. Kreth products are already entering human markets. Their engineers work on joint projects. Students exchange between our universities. In a generation, will their kids want to attack the species that educated them, employed their parents, helped build their prosperity? or will they want to maintain profitable relationship? At a reconstruction site, Talrus watched human and Kreth workers share lunch. Casual conversation through translators, comparing families and telling jokes. One Kreth engineer showed hollow images of his daughter's first day at school. Patterson congratulated him enthusiastically. "Your people killed humans 6 months ago," Talrus observed quietly. "Different people," Patterson replied. "That guy was navigator on a supply ship, never fired a weapon. His government sent him to war, we sent him home. Now he's helping rebuild what the war damaged. Holding grudges helps no one." But what about those who did kill humans? The admiral who ordered civilian executions. Standing trial under Kreth law, Patterson's voice hardened slightly. With human observers ensuring fairness, he'll be convicted. Evidence is overwhelming and sentenced appropriately. Justice, yes. Revenge, no. There's a difference. Talrus attended the trial. Kreth judges, Kreth prosecutors, Kreth citizens filling the gallery. Humans present only as observers and witnesses. The admiral's defense argued he followed orders from higher authority. Orders to murder civilians, the prosecutor, a Kreth woman who'd lost family in the attacks, replied. Even our military code prohibited such actions. You chose to violate it. The verdict surprised no one, guilty on all counts. Sentence of life imprisonment. But what surprised Talrus was the response. No human celebration, no satisfaction, just acknowledgement that justice had been served. "Did you want harsher punishment?" Talrus asked Hensley, attending as official observer. "I wanted appropriate punishment under Kreth law administered by Kreth courts," she replied. "This achieves that. If we demanded his execution, Kreth would see it as vengeance. This way, their own justice system held him accountable. That's far more powerful long-term." 9 months after the war, Talrus compiled his final observations. Humans wage peace with same precision. They wage war, every action calculated for maximum long-term benefit. They invest heavily in reconstruction, education, economic development. Not from altruism, but from strategic recognition that stable, prosperous neighbors don't start wars. Foster found him reviewing data in a station cafe. Final report observer. "Attempting to understand human strategy," Talrus admitted. "You spent more resources building peace than fighting war. Why?" Foster ordered coffee. Humans drank alarming amounts before responding. "Because we learned something the hard way. Wars have two costs, what you spend fighting them and what you spend on the next one. If you cheap out on peace, you guarantee another war. But if you invest in genuine reconstruction, in helping former enemies rebuild and prosper, you break the cycle." She sipped her coffee. Earth tried the punishment approach, didn't work. Tried the investment approach. Created the longest peace in our history. We're just applying those lessons here. "The galaxy sees this as weakness," Talrus said. "The galaxy sees what it wants to see," Foster replied. "But in 20 years, when Kreth kids educated in human engineering principles are building the next generation of stations, when Kreth and human companies are partnering on joint ventures, when our economies are integrated and our cultures are exchanging ideas peacefully, then the galaxy will see results, and results matter more than perceptions." Talrus recorded his final entry. "I came to document human warfare and found human philosophy. They don't fight to conquer but to resolve, don't wage war to win territory but to establish conditions for peace. This requires discipline, patience, investment most species lack. But it achieves something unprecedented, former enemies becoming partners in mutual prosperity." He paused, considering. "The galaxy fears human warriors. Perhaps they should fear human peace builders more. Because humans don't just end wars. They prevent the next ones. And species that can transform enemies into allies through strategic generosity is far more dangerous to conflict than any military force could be." Outside, human and Kreth children played together in the reconstructed parks, their laughter echoing through stations built to last centuries. Testimony to human long-term thinking, proof that the most effective weapon against war isn't superior firepower. It's superior peace. 2 years. After the Kreth conflict ended, Talrus received an invitation to speak at the Coalition Military Academy. His documentation of human warfare had sparked intense debate across member species. Some praised human methods while others feared them. He accepted, knowing his testimony would influence galactic military doctrine for generations. The auditorium held representatives from 43 species, military officers, strategic planners, government officials. Hensley sat in the front row, now retired from active service but teaching human military philosophy as guest instructor. Patterson attended as civilian consultant. Rodriguez represented Human Diplomatic Corps. The same people who'd fought the war now worked to explain it. Observer Talrus, the Academy Commandant began. Your research documented the Kreth conflict extensively. What conclusions have you reached about human warfare? Talrus activated his presentation. Holographic displays showed combat footage, reconstruction efforts, current Kreth prosperity metrics. I came to document savagery and found sophistication, he began. Human warfare operates on principles fundamentally different from galactic norms. They don't fight to win battles, but to establish conditions that prevent future conflicts. A Korthan general interrupted. That's propaganda. All species claim noble intentions. What makes humans different? Results, Talrus replied simply. He pulled up comparative data. Kreth conflict duration, 41 days of active combat, casualties, 647 Kreth wounded, 38 dead, 0 human deaths, prisoners taken, 3,200, all processed according to coalition law, post-war stability, immediate, continuing for 24 months with no insurgency. He changed displays. Compare to Korthan Velek's war of similar scope, 318 days combat. Casualties, 47,000 combined. Prisoners, minimal, most combatants killed rather than captured. Post-war stability, ongoing insurgency now in 7th year. The Korthan general's mouthparts clicked in agitation. The Veleks refused to surrender honorably. The Kreth also refused to surrender initially, Talrus countered. Humans created conditions where surrender became preferable to continued resistance, not through terror, but through demonstration that surrender meant survival and fair treatment. Psychological warfare more effective than physical destruction. Hensley stood when recognized. If I may address the general's concern, she waited for acknowledgement. Humans don't achieve results through special weapons or superior numbers. We achieve them through patience, precision, and long-term planning. The Kreth conflict took 41 days because we spent 3 weeks building conditions for surrender rather than 3 days forcing it through casualties. We accepted longer timeline to minimize deaths. That's not weakness, that's discipline. But at what cost? A Brevian strategist asked. Your post-war investment in Kreth recovery exceeded your military expenses. Correct, Rodriguez answered. And that investment created stable trading partners, eliminated refugee crisis, prevented insurgency, and established precedent that wars against humans end in reconstruction rather than retribution. Calculate the cost of alternatives. Indefinite occupation, ongoing security operations, diplomatic isolation. Our approach cost more initially but less over time. Talrus showed footage of current Kreth society. Thriving economy, stable government, joint human-Kreth ventures. 2 years later, Kreth Republic is coalition member in good standing, their military restructured as defensive force, their economy integrated with human markets, their children educated in schools built to human safety standards. This transformation cost humans significant resources but created lasting peace. You bought their loyalty, the Korthan general accused. We invested in their prosperity, Hensley corrected. Loyalty bought through fear or dependency breaks when circumstances change. Loyalty earned through genuine improvement in quality of life endures because people defend what benefits them. Kreth citizens don't support peace because we forced them. They support it because peace brings them better lives than war ever did. A young Dreldani officer raised a tentacle. How do you maintain discipline during conflict? Most species struggle with controlling soldiers' desire for revenge, especially after civilian casualties. Patterson fielded this question. Training and philosophy. Human soldiers learn that revenge is failure of mission. Our objective isn't killing enemies but ending conflicts. Every unnecessary death creates future problems. We train extensively in restraint, de-escalation, minimum necessary force, not because we're pacifists, but because we're practical. Dead enemies can't learn better behavior. Prisoners can. This works with Kreth, the Korthan general persisted. Honorable species capable of learning. What about genuine threats, species that view mercy as weakness? Talrus had anticipated this. He pulled up files on the Vothrak incident. 6 months after Kreth conflict, Vothrak raiders attacked human research station and killed 23 civilians studying peaceful conflict resolution. The Vothrak tested human resolve, he explained. They assumed human mercy indicated weakness. They were incorrect. Footage showed human response. Swift, overwhelming, complete destruction of Vothrak military capacity in under 48 hours. But even in aggressive war, humans maintained precision. Military targets only, 0 civilian casualties, immediate offer of reconstruction assistance contingent on demilitarization. Humans adapt their response to the threat, Talrus explained. Kreth were misguided and could learn. They received patient siege and generous reconstruction. Vothrak were predatory and mistook mercy for weakness. They received immediate overwhelming force and conditional assistance. But notice, even against Vothrak, humans didn't massacre civilians or commit atrocities. They removed military threat with surgical precision, then offered path to peace. Hensley elaborated. Human military doctrine recognizes that different situations require different responses, but the underlying principle remains constant. Minimum force necessary to achieve strategic objectives, maximum effort to establish lasting peace. This requires judgment, flexibility, discipline, but it works because it addresses root causes rather than symptoms. The Brevian strategist studied the data. Your methods require significant cultural buy-in. Patience, discipline, willingness to invest in former enemies. How do you maintain popular support for such expensive peace building? By showing results, Rodriguez answered. Kreth War cost human lives. Our citizens demanded accountability. We provided it through trials and justice. They demanded security. We provided it through strategic peace that prevents future attacks. They questioned reconstruction costs. We showed them economic benefits of stable trading partners and avoided costs of ongoing conflict. Democratic societies support policies that work. Ours work. Talrus concluded his presentation with comparative analysis. Human methods cost more initially in resources and time, but they cost far less in lives and produce far better long-term outcomes. Species that adopt even partial elements of human doctrine see reduced casualties, shorter conflicts, more stable post-war periods. The question isn't whether human methods work. Data proves they do, but whether your species possess discipline to implement them. During the question period, a Siltharin admiral asked, "Do humans ever fight total war, unrestricted conflict against existential threats?" Hensley's expression turned somber. Humans are capable of total warfare. We practiced it extensively on Earth. We know exactly how to wage wars of extermination. She paused. That knowledge is why we don't. We've seen what total war does to winners and losers alike. The trauma it creates lasts generations. The hatreds it builds guarantee future conflicts. We're capable of unleashing hell. We choose not to because we've been there and know it solves nothing. So human restraint comes from experience, the Siltharin pressed. From 10,000 years of killing each other in every way imaginable and learning it doesn't work, Hensley confirmed. We're not peaceful species. We're exhausted warriors who finally learned better approaches. That experience informs everything we do. We know war's true cost because we've paid it repeatedly. We know peace's true value because we've achieved it against incredible odds. Talrus presented his final conclusion. The galaxy fears human warriors. But after 2 years of research, I believe they should fear human wisdom more, because warriors can be defeated but wisdom spreads. Human military philosophy is already influencing coalition doctrine, their methods being adopted by species who see results. In 20 years, galactic warfare may look very different. not because humans conquered anyone, but because they demonstrated better way. Better for whom? The Corthan general demanded. Better for everyone who prefers prosperity to poverty, peace to perpetual conflict, investing in futures rather than avenging pasts, Talrus replied. Human methods aren't altruistic, they're strategic. But strategy that benefits everyone creates more stable galaxy than zero-sum warfare. The presentation ended. Debate continued for hours, but consensus emerged slowly. Human warfare represented evolution in military thinking, precision over passion, long-term stability over short-term victory, strategic investment over tactical domination. Not all species would adopt these methods, but enough would to change galactic conflict dynamics fundamentally. Talrus found Hensley afterward. The Corthan general still objects. He's invested in old ways, Hensley replied. His species built reputation on martial prowess. Our methods threaten that identity. She smiled slightly. But his junior officers were taking notes. Change happens generationally. Do you believe human methods will spread? I believe species that adopt them will prosper while species that don't will face increasing isolation, Hensley said. Not through human pressure, but through natural selection. Our trading partners do better than our opponents. Our allies avoid costly conflicts. Our methods produce measurable benefits. Economics will drive adoption better than any military force could. Talrus recorded final observation. I watched humans go to war. I witnessed not savagery but sophistication, not rage but calculation, not conquest but resolution. They fight with overwhelming force to create overwhelming peace. They win battles to prevent wars. They invest in enemies to create partners. This approach terrifies species accustomed to simple violence because it represents something far more dangerous. What's that? Patterson asked. Evolution, Talrus replied. Humans evolved warfare beyond mere violence into tool for creating peace. That's threat to every species still fighting like their ancestors, because you can't defeat evolution. You can only adapt or become obsolete. He looked at the humans who'd become his colleagues over 2 years. The galaxy feared your weapons. They should have feared your wisdom, because weapons kill enemies, but wisdom transforms them into allies, and that's far more dangerous to warfare itself. Patterson smiled. Welcome to the future, observer. Humans didn't invent it. We just showed one possible path forward. A path many will follow, Talrus predicted. Then our work here is done, Hensley said quietly. And somewhere across the galaxy, species watched and learned, because humans had demonstrated something profound, that the best way to win wars was making them unnecessary,